Hi guys, this is Ableton Bible, and in this session we're going to be taking a look at acid synthesis. So first things first, I'll show you the beat. Just turn this top down a tiny bit. We've got our kick drum. And if we go to our bass, I've just drawn this little bit of MIDI in. So just so you can hear that, I'm going to drop operator onto the MIDI track. So nothing exciting at the moment. Just going to get rid of the beat so you can hear it, just the kick and the bass. So the first thing we're going to do is change the algorithm, because as we know, operator is a FM synth and we don't actually need FM for this task. Because we're trying to copy an old bit of analog hardware, the TB303, all we need is a square wave and a triangle wave. And what we're now going to do is find ourselves a static cut-off frequency level. So we're just going to pull that right down to get it sounding a bit more like a bass. So the typical characteristic of a 303 style bass is extreme resonance. So what we can do is just turn this right the way up and get it to start resonating and screaming at us. And then we can change the filter type and add some drive, just to add some extra low end weight to the signal. And as we begin to modulate this cutoff, moving it up and down, we can really start to hear it squeal and give us that acid vibe. And it's not quite perfect yet, but as we move this envelope, you can start to hear the resonance become a bit more audible. And then it's only when we add the attack that it really starts to sound like the traditional acid synths. So what we've got to do is we've just got to set this starting value so the cutoff is actually slightly open. And just pull these values into place until we start to get something familiar. And like I said, there's loads of different takes on the acid sound, so we need to make it a bit of an open source as far as things like the attack, decay, cutoff and resonance go, and also things like distortion. So we'll be mapping all of these features to our macro controls, so we can fiddle around with them and automate them throughout a track. So it sounds quite nice at the moment, but it's still very clean. So we've got a few different things we could use. We can use overdrive, or we can use distortion or saturation. So what I'm going to do is just smash this with overdrive. And we can use some fairly horrible settings. It's all part of the sound. Just turn down the volume slightly to keep this out the red. And we're also going to give this a bit of space by applying some reverb to it. And we're going to self-contain all of this within the rack. So I'm just going to move these into the device rack. And just alter this reverb so it's a little less muddy. Pull out some of that low end, pull out some of the high end. So we've got a little bit of a damping or diffusion network now. And it does sound good, but it wouldn't be acid unless we had some slides in there. So I've programmed some slides in. So what we can do is just turn on this glide function and have a little play around with the portamento time, and we can hear this sliding around now from note to note. Now it's time to map some of these macro controls. So the first one we're going to map is the attack and then the decay. And try and think carefully about the order you do these in. You want it to be intuitive and easy to be able to manipulate. You want to just at a glance be able to look at these macro controls and understand exactly what's going on. So keep certain controls next to each other, such as filter cutoff and resonance. And once we've got these mapped, what we can do is we can go into the browser whilst the mapping is open, and we can just fine tune these as to how they work and what their end limits are. Because with some of these settings, we don't really want to be going from 0 milliseconds to 20 seconds. We can use a much smaller range than that. So we can map this shaper and the distortion. So we've got two different types of distortion going on. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to set up a second operator. It's still going to be subtractive. I'm still going to keep it in the subtractive algorithm, but I'm going to change this to a different waveform. So we've got one square wave and we've got one saw wave. And then what we can do is we can use a macro control to switch between these. So just like how we'd be able to switch between a square and a saw, we'll be able to do that with this device as well. So it gives us two different flavors of acid. One's going to be slightly buzzier and one's got that more hollow texture to it. Personally, I'm all about the square wave. And finally, what we can also do is we can use a third oscillator as our sub oscillator. So we're just going to set that to a bog standard sine wave. And rather than use the macro control on the on off switch, we're going to use the macro control on the level. So we can just bring that sub in as required if we want a little bit more low end beef and a bit more weight to the sound. Now we're just going to mess around with these parameters and ranges. And the best way of doing this is just to twiddle around with the macro knobs, and you'll be able to hear if something is way out of range. And then what you can do is just tailor it, pull it in, and then test the knob again, and you'll see where the sort of comfortable zones and ranges are for that particular knob or set of knobs when they work together. just realised the reason that I wasn't getting much sound out of that is because I'd mapped the wrong attack, so just be aware of that. Make sure you're checking which shell you're in. So I need to be in the filter shell and map the attack of the filter envelope. So now I'm just going to go and rename these. And if we want to, we can even color code these macro knobs as well. Keep everything looking nice and pretty and keep the housekeeping fresh. So what you can then do is save this device or save this instrument rack, and this is absolutely perfect for if you've got a little MIDI device to control it with some knobs, just to automate this throughout a track, and you can really breathe some life rather than having to use someone else's acid preset or having to use an acid sample. And plus this is really good fun to make as well. And you really can get a whole host of different sounds out of this one device. So just to prove that it is a transferable skill, what we're going to do is the exact same thing again, but instead of using operator or anything native, we're going to use silent.